Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hi, Nizam. How are you?
I'm fine. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you.
Oh, you're very welcome. My honor.
And friends, we have Peter Woodbury here. And, here comes, I'll introduce you all a bit about Peter. He has received his undergraduate degree in psychology from Harvard University and his master's degree in social work from Boston University. He trained in hypnotherapy and past life regression techniques with Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Alan Chips, and Daniel Brown, Ph.D. He enjoyed a successful career in Boston area as a psychotherapist and a faculty member of Boston University School of Social Work. That's an amazing combination, Peter, where a psychotherapist turning into a full-time hypnotherapist and past life regression therapist is a wonderful. So we'll explore much into it. And then, friends, Peter learned about Edgar Cayce while in college and moved to Virginia Beach in 2002 to become part of Edgar Cayce organization, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. He became one of the ARE's most popular speakers, creating their life coaching and past life regression hypnosis certification trainings, which sold out each year. He also taught regression hypnosis at their Atlantic University. Peter left the ARE in 2021. Peter has become one of the world's most prolific regressionists, having conducted over 6,000 regression sessions, about 350 regressions a year. He also is a life coach and mentor to coaches and regressionists. So he travels extensively, especially, Egypt.
Mhm.
Right, Peter? And his
Mhm.
teachings, his mission, and is also a tour guide leading spiritually based travel programs around the world. Ever been to India, Peter?
Yes, yes, three
Oh,
times.
oh, wow.
I enjoyed
Awesome.
it very much.
Thank you.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of demand to go back.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. So, whenever you come next time, please, I would love to meet you here.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
So, Peter, a traditional psychotherapist, how did he got interested into hypnotherapy?
You know, I look at it, if you asked me that question at different times in my life, I would explain it differently. But
Okay.
since meeting since being introduced to the work of Edgar Cayce and being introduced to reincarnation and the strange concept that Edgar Cayce has that we pick our parents. And so if I indeed picked my parents, it's the perfect plan for being the person I am now because both of my parents were psychiatrists and my father was a psychoanalyst. And so
Oh,
since from an early age there was an interest in the subconscious mind and that the subconscious mind is much more of a determinant of behavior than the conscious mind. And so my father worked with hypnosis and so I was familiar with it. When I went to Boston, I was always curious about the work of Dan Brown, the well-regarded hypnotherapist that worked and taught out of Harvard University. So eventually, I got involved with Dan Brown, but somehow I knew it was incubating. And then I found out about the work of Brian Weiss, and he got so popular with past life regressions. Then I moved to Virginia Beach and the ARE, got more into the understanding of past lives. And one way of accessing them is through regression. So I took the training programs that were offered there at the ARE. I started to practice, started to conduct regressions, and I found them very, very successful and very, very helpful. And at the same time, because for a while I was still licensed as a traditional therapist, and then I
mhm.
say I had my woo-woo practice
Yeah.
developing,
Whoa,
woo
practice.
spiritual. So I had kind of both. But what I was doing, because as a licensed practitioner, I had to take continuing education. Every 2 years, I had to have a certain number of credits to keep my skills up. And I just focused on hypnosis. So I got a training in clinical hypnosis at the same time that I had the woo-woo hypnosis, and then eventually began to integrate the two. I began to teach through the ARE, and I continue to do that. I teach, I practice, I mentor, and I think having come from a more traditional background and adding hypnosis, I think hypnosis just adds so much because there's only so much we can access about ourselves with the conscious mind. And once we involve this subconscious mind, we have an enormous field to work with. It's like in our conscious mind, we're wondering, why do I get along with my brother and not with my sister? Why do my sister and brother get along? Or why do I keep dating the wrong people? And I do this talk psychotherapy. And then you move into the subconscious realms, you begin to understand other factors. Like I think Sigmund Freud, he thought that everything was pinned in childhood, that your childhood development had to do with your adult problems. And I think he would have loved regression because it says it's deeper than childhood. It goes back into past lives, the patterns that we bring into this life. So that's some of how I got involved, just being curious, being open. And I think my intention was always to try to help people, to figure out how to help people progress. And then hypnosis became a tool. Not everybody can access the subconscious realm through hypnosis. Most people can, but it's just one tool. There's so many. And I think the more tools you have as a practitioner, the more people you can help.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Peter, since you specialize as a regressionist, there are a lot of why do we have to dig the past of a person? Why not focus on future? Why not focus on solutions? Why to traumatize a person by digging deep and going back? And so, what's your perspective?
That's a great question. It's probably one of the most important questions. Why can't we leave the past alone? And I say I have no problem leaving the past alone, but for most people, the past isn't dead. Like they're living today, a repetition of yesterday, and they're repeating all these issues from the past. So I only really focus on the past when it's stuck, when the present is influenced by the past, because there's so many things from the past that we've worked through. Then you don't need to work through them. If it's let go of, then leave it alone. But it's the current patterns that we kind of are looking at. What are the causes that we can't seem to get rid of them? Then looking into the past is helpful.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, let's say a client has come to you, nightmares of unseen places, unknown
Say that
faces.
again. A nightmare?
Yeah, nightmare,
Oh, a nightmare. Yeah. Okay.
nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
He or she is seeing unknown faces and unseen places, and something is haunting. Where you having regressed thousands of people, it's a clear case of past life. Okay, just creating a scenario. However, this person is very adamant or a non-believer, maybe not adamant, but
Right.
a non-believer of past life.
Right.
How do you deal with such thing?
There's so many. First of all, when somebody comes, let's say, with a nightmare, I have no idea if it's past life or where it's coming from. That's one of the fun things about regression because you're kind of an explorer. So you're using, sometimes there's something called exploratory surgery where you don't know what's going on with the person, so you go take a look. And so
Okay.
hypnosis, especially the first session, is oftentimes exploratory. Let's see what we find, and it's not going to be negative. I mean, doing hypnosis doesn't have negative side effects. We can talk about that theme later if there ever could be, but just doing an exploratory session to see what's there is going to be just fine. And then the second part of your question about remind me, it's about if somebody comes with a nightmare. What was the second part that
Unknown
you alluded
faces,
to?
unknown places.
And how would I approach that? Or there was something about
How
the
do you
question.
approach it? How do you
Um,
approach it?
Well, it would depend on, I would interview the person and see is this a recurring dream? What is it? What effects does it have when they wake up? Like, what basically I'd want to find out what they're wanting to learn about it, what they feel about it. And
Okay.
then you see what happens in regression is that you open up a person to their subconscious realm and you begin an exploration. Milton Erickson has a quote that I like very much. It says, our clients have lost touch with their subconscious mind, and we're just reintroducing them to that.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm doing. I make the suggestions. You've had this dream, these faces, and then I listen to see what the person brings up. If it brings up a lot of emotion, because what can happen that's different in a dream, we tend to be passive. Like we wake up and we just remember this dream, unless it's been a lucid dream, but most people don't lucid dream. They just have a dream and they wake up with it, especially if it's repetitive. But in a hypnosis session, these states of consciousness are interactive. So if they see this scary face, I can ask them, who is this? What does it remind you of? And then they begin to say, oh, it seems like it's my grandfather, or it seems like it's a spirit guide or something like that. So then they begin to see. That's why I think hypnosis is so effective for working with trauma. Because like you were saying earlier, if we just ask somebody to talk about trauma in the conscious state, they get re-traumatized. But in trance states, if people go through trauma, it's not stagnant. They can interact with it. They can learn and grow and evolve in the trance state with different experiences. Like trance states are alive. They're not stagnant. So that's part of the benefit. And then when the person comes back into consciousness, the work that they've done has been on the subconscious realm. So when they are conscious again, it feels almost like they're waking up from a dream. But that subconscious realm has reset certain patterns. So their waking state is going to be different. They might not know why. Sometimes I say it's like going to the chiropractor, where you get aligned and you feel a little funny, but the rest of the day you begin to have a different kind of energy flowing through you. That's some of what can happen in a session.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And Pete,
welcome.
at times a person believes that this could be a past life issue, but on a contrast, it could be something from childhood also.
That's a
So,
great. I'm glad that was the follow up. You had asked that earlier about if a person doesn't believe in past lives or something
yeah,
like that. I I I take solace in the work of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung believed in reincarnation and past lives, and he worked with hypnosis with his clients, but he knew that they didn't believe in reincarnation. So he didn't make that an obstacle. He called it creative imagination. So he
okay,
said, let's just do something and you just imagine something. And so they might be remembering a past life and they just think of it like a dream, but they will have a lot of emotion, a lot of integration, have a lot of meaning to them. But if they label it as real or not real, is really secondary. Like I teach oftentimes with my students, whether a session is real or not is much less important than if it's helpful or not. What
yes,
is reality? Is this reality right now? If I go to sleep and dream, is that reality? And then when I die, is it, reality is very consciousness based. So I don't put a lot of stock in trying to put a litmus test. Is this real? Did this really happen or not? I don't like wherever it came from, the subconscious kicked something forward. It could have kicked infinite number of things forward, and it kicked forward this story. And this person is having an emotional, spiritual relationship to what's happening, and it's affecting them. That's what matters to me.
okay, thank you, Peter.
You're
And
welcome.
some people will be like, lot of curiosity that I want to know if I was a celebrity. There's this fascination. I don't know why, but that which celebrity I was, which could be completely a contrast that he or she might be a very ordinary person in one of their past lives.
Yeah.
So this fascination of which celebrity I was in my past life, or which famous figure of history from the history I was. So, what's your advice for such assumptions and curiosity?
I don't get those people like people that say I want to know if I was a pharaoh or these sort of things. For some reason, they don't come to me. I mean, most of our past lives, we were rice farmers in China, or we were sugarcane plantation workers. It's like most of our lives are mundane as far as the importance, but what matters is the relationships that we have. When we were a rice farmer in China, your wife was your mother, and she was a mean mother, and so now you're playing out that karma. So it's much more the family contexts that arise, and then important periods of time. I've had people regress to more like in significant times rather than being significant people. Like I remember a very powerful regression where a woman had been a librarian at the Alexandria library when it burnt down. And so she was very, very, very upset that the library was burning. And in this life, she was involved in digitizing everything. Her job was and she could see that when the library burnt, she said, there's got to be a better way to store information than in paper. So she could see the underpinnings of that. But I've not had many people remember significant lives, sometimes close to significant people. It's I'm a Christian, very broad-minded, but a fair number of people have remembered lifetimes in Israel or having to do with the life of Christ. That's come up a fair amount of time, but nobody has been Christ yet. Never had somebody remember being Jesus.
And Peter, at times, have you ever encountered that the person is interested to see his or her past life, but doesn't matter how many sessions a person has gone through, nothing has come up, no awareness, no traces of past life because of the resistance, because of fear. I don't know, whatever might be the reason, but
Yeah.
they did not end up seeing their past lives. Has it
Well,
happened?
there's two questions that I'll answer with that I see in your question. I'll try
Mhm.
to answer both. Um, I think each regressionist, if you're doing spiritual regression, you develop like a spiritual specialty. So it's just like a doctor becomes a surgeon or a psychiatrist. You get into a specialty. And I started off as a general practitioner. For many years, I just did past life regression. And then it's almost like overnight, my work shifted and it became less about past life regression and more about different types of spiritual experiences. So right now, I don't call my training past life regression anymore. I call it regression hypnosis because it takes a lot of work now for me to get somebody to a past life. I get much more now what I call soul contact, where people come into an awareness of themselves. And sometimes it may start with past life or multiple past lives, but oftentimes it's getting to the level of guides and explaining to the person issues that are going on in their life. Sometimes it's symbolic, sometimes it seems more clear or direct. So that's hypnosis is based on suggestions. So if you get somebody to a transition point and then you say, behind this door is a past life, a really important past life, if they're accepting suggestions, that's what they'll experience. But now I make more of a suggestion that behind this door is something that's going to be really helpful for you. And then people go into all different types of experience. And a lot of times I found that past life memories are like remembering a dream. It's kind of like you have to integrate it. Why did I remember this dream or this past life? How is it relevant to me now? And so after sessions, there was a lot of kind of dream interpretation or past life regression interpretation. But now with getting what's more helpful for you, people get the direct information. As much as the information is available at the time, what I've learned with regressions is that since you're coming into soul contact, it's like your soul or God, it wants a relationship with you. Sometimes I say it doesn't want a one night stand. Like if you date a woman or date a man, the first date, you're not going to get everything you want. They're going to hold you back. You get a kiss on the second date and it progresses until you find this person you want to marry. And that's what the soul wants. It gives you enough that you want to come back. And the second time you come, it gives you a little more, but it keeps you wanting to come back. And that's what I try to do with sessions is that sometimes it's an introduction to this state of consciousness. And I hope that the person continues it. My hope is that people can gain access to these realms of consciousness without needing to pay me to do it with them.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. This was very valid point because not every person might go into their past life and still they'll be longing for some knowledge or wisdom because that is more important for them than the curiosity. Not everyone is curious, but they are longing to find some answer which they haven't got. It could be metaphorically revealed or some insight, some wisdom might come in the regression work. However, people expect that some past life, if they visit, then only they get the solution. So thank you for clarifying that. Behind that door, anything could be revealed.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the other question you had is some people are difficult to hypnotize. So
Mhm.
I would say about between 80 and 90% of people in a first session can gain access to the subconscious mind in productive ways. But then there's about 5-10% of people that are difficult to hypnotize. Generally, they have what I call a muscle bound left brain. They're very logic centered, and a session
Mhm.
has to involve the imagination. It's a creative experience. And so, left brain dominant people, like engineer types, they've been taught not to trust the imagination. You're making stuff up. So I wouldn't say they resist. It's just hard for them to get into that realm. So they need more practice, more sessions. And that's where Milton Erickson's techniques were basically designed for people that are difficult to hypnotize. So then you
Oh,
have to move into a whole different technique with muscle bound left brain people. And the other is, like you mentioned, is trauma. You know, if you look at the nature of hypnosis, it goes against what people are comfortable with if they've had trauma. You know, I used to work predominantly in person. Can you imagine a man alone in an office with a woman, and I say, "Oh, go ahead and lie down on this couch and close your eyes." That's very. If you've had assaults, if you've had even subconscious memories of being vulnerable with men, that's going to put up red flags. You're not
hmm.
going to let yourself. So sometimes I remember I used to notice when that would happen. I would feel like the first session, the client had one eye open and one eye closed, to kind of see
Okay.
what I was going to do. And then the second session, they would actually see that I was safe, and then they would be open to the session. So over logic centered folks, people with some degree of trauma, you can work when you do work with people that have trauma. You have to give a lot of permission. You have to put them in control. The induction has to involve their choice. You don't deepen. You put them in an elevator, for example, and say you're in control. Go ahead, go as deep as you want to go. If it feels too deep, come up. So that's one technique you can work. And then there are some medical conditions. I found that people that are very depressed, that
Mhm.
depression seems to tamp down the ability to be creative and to imagine. It just
Oh,
seems that so if you can't imagine, you can't have a session. So folks that are very depressed, they have a trouble with it. And then people that have some sleep disorders. Some people have a kind of narcolepsy where they're either awake or they're asleep. Because to achieve trance states, you have to be in an in-between state. So I've worked with people where they're awake and all of a sudden they're asleep, and then I have to wake them up and they're back awake and they don't get an in-between state. So those are two medical conditions that are difficult to work with
okay.
hypnosis.
Okay, Peter. Thank you very much. Let's go little deep into spirituality now. So,
Yes.
past lives, yes, there are various school of thoughts like, the soul, same soul being incarnated as human being. Have you ever come across a person being animal or a bird or any in different forms, Peter?
You know, I personally don't believe in transmigration, and Edgar Cayce didn't believe in that, but it has come up. And so if it comes up, when I conduct a session, I put my beliefs aside. Is
Okay.
I'm not going to impose. If somebody says, "Oh, I'm in a past life as a horse," I don't say, "No, that's impossible. People can't be
Okay.
horses." I just let them be a horse or let them be the animal, because I do believe that at times in our history we could project into animals. Casey even said the way we look we could look like animal features, not because we've been animals, but because we've admired those animals. So some people look like lions and some people look like deers because of the worship of those animals, and it had an influence on our physiology. Um, so yeah, I just go with where the person goes. I'm always searching for what's helpful about it. I do believe that our pets, animals, reincarnate, and so sometimes people like, you know, similar to a near-death experience when you see everybody that's waiting for you, see their animals, and sometimes animals have come back to them. They lost their now they're back as their dog or something like that. But again, your question about um, it,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it says the internet's unstable.
Uh,
But sometimes people remember animal experiences, especially if in this life they're very close to animals. Like if somebody raises or breeds horses, they might remember go into an experience of what it's like to be a horse.
Okay, okay. And do you believe that a soul chooses its parents?
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. I think when I teach this, I say, does anybody want to leave? Because it's like, so how could I possibly have picked my parents? Most parents, most children and parents have conflicts. So I know when I first heard that I'd picked my parents, I thought that was like crazy. But then I looked at what my parents were psychologists or psychiatrists. They were Catholics, and they were interested in metaphysics, and everything um, that I do now is very connected to my childhood upbringing, kind of what I learned from them. I'm not a Catholic anymore, but certainly spirituality is very, and faith and God are very important to me. So, and then also, Edgar Cayce interpreted the book of Revelation. And in chapter 11, the twins appear to John. And Cayce interprets the twins. He says that everybody in their spiritual growth has to reach a place where they interpret the elements of them that are beyond this life, that you have to realize you're a soul. And the two important elements before you were born that you bring into this life are your past lives and your astrology. And so I do a lot with past lives. I've learned I don't teach anything to do with astrology because it's such a complicated field. I haven't dedicated myself to it. But understanding my astrology was also very helpful because for example, I have something called Pluto on the ascendant. So Pluto is like the god of the underworld. And if you had on your ascendant, it's like it gives you that Scorpio sense, and you're interested in the underworld. Perfect sense. I could never work as a bank teller. Like I could never do the same thing every day. Like I want to know depth about people. And
Okay.
hypnosis allows you, I can ask very deep questions and I can go very deep with people. And it's very satisfying to me. So I think understanding your astrology, it's especially helpful for what you're going to do as a profession, what you would be drawn to. And then your past lives, very helpful as to the relationships in your life. What patterns are you bringing into this life with? For example, I have my moon in Aries. And so I've had to learn how to deal with anger. I've had to learn how to, I'm not the boss all the time. In past lives, I was the boss, you're a king or something like that. And so I'm bringing that forward. And it's helpful for astrology because astrology brings your challenges forward. It doesn't hide them. If you have to deal with anger, boom, let's put it in your moon. So you're going to be, ever since you're a kid, you have a little temper that you learn how to have to manage. So anyway, that's just why I think that I learned this at a point where when I was doing past life regression, I was wondering, is this the right thing to dedicate my life to? Is it just sort of helpful to people? Is it just sort of fun? Should I be doing something else? And then I read about past lives and astrology, the two most important things for people to understand. And it got me recommitted to how important this work is. I think our world, like Milton Erickson said, people generally need to be reintroduced to their subconscious. And then in the subconscious is your soul self, your God self, your oneness. I think people need to be reintroduced to their soul self. Like I think our world needs more soul consciousness rather than ego consciousness.
Yes, yes, Peter. So even if a person is born as an orphan or at very young age, one has lost his or her parents, even that was a choice which a soul was already aware of what kind of
Yes.
family environment he or she is going to be born to go through such experience, Peter.
Yes. I think to make it simple, nothing's really simple, but as far as I can understand, there's two elements. One is karma. If you're born as an orphan, you may have abandoned your children. And so you need to experience what that was. But that's not the only one. A lot of it is soul choice.
Okay.
Sometimes you have a soul group and one of them has been an orphan and then the other is an orphan and you want to experience that together. So a lot of times the element, because it can be a very high learning to be an orphan, to learn since a child, to learn what it's like to have that kind of questioning and sense of abandonment and loneliness. It's suffering is misunderstood on the conscious level. We all want to avoid suffering, but suffering is probably one of our greatest teachers. How we work through that. It's in suffering we possess our soul. We get much more into consciousness of our deeper self. I tried to do I like to make things more simple. And I think for a while I was trying to work with suffering because it's not a simple subject. So I wanted to do like suffering for dummies. And the best I could come up with, it's still not simple, is that on the soul level, let's say you incarnate as a prince. And as a prince, oh my God, every need is taken care of. You have all the women you want, you have all the food you want, you're just taken around, you sunbathe all the time. And then you have a life where you're an orphan and you're abandoned. You have parents that abuse you, and you go from foster home to foster home, you go through a rough life, you become addicted, all these sort of things. On the soul level, the orphan life is much more important, much more soul development there than in the easy candy cake.
Oh, okay, okay.
But that's really difficult. People don't, nobody wants to suffer,
Yes, agree. And people attracting wrong partners, or despite that they have loved someone but ended up with very abusive marriage, traumatic relationships, toxic relationships of all sorts, is again that. See, this could trigger a person, anyone listening to this also, that if they say it was your choice to attract such person to learn your lessons. However,
Yes.
what's your
And it,
version
go
for
ahead.
this?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, it's not
What's
because of
your
punishment. Let's say if you had an abusive childhood and you attract abusive partners, it's not that you're choosing to suffer. It's not like you're choosing to be punished, but you have to change some kind of fundamental way of thinking about yourself to alter that pattern. So let's say, like on this, I always say, we plan our lives on the soul level. The
Mhm.
ego is not involved. And so
Hmm.
when the ego is born, when we come into the body, and so the ego is like, what the hell is this? Like, who are these people? They're so mean. I want to escape them. So we run away from our parents, and then we find the same patterns with other people. And we
Oh,
keep thinking, what? There can't be a God. I'm being tortured. This is a horrible world. But it's not until we understand a bigger picture. You may have had a pattern from past lives of tolerating abusive relationships. And so you
mhm.
have to learn how to set boundaries and limits. But you pick, oftentimes past lives are seeded in childhood. So if you want to work on an abusive pattern, you might have an abusive mother or father. And so they set that pattern of you're trying to be loved by people that only give you abuse. So you leave home, and lo and behold, your partner, it treats you the same way. In your soul evolution and development, you have to get the wherewithal to say enough. I don't want to tolerate this anymore. I'm going to move past it, because the pattern isn't outside of the person, it's within the person. As a psychotherapist, let's say Mary comes to me for therapy, and she's dating Daniel. And Daniel is terrible. He's abusive. He steals her money. He doesn't have a job. So Daniel's the problem, right? Breaks up with Daniel. She starts dating Steve. Steve is abusive. He doesn't have a job. He has the same pattern. So it's
Yes.
if you look at to solve it outside of yourself, you're not going to get there. You have to look inside yourself and says, what is it in me that feels that this is what I deserve, that this is familiar? Familiar comes from the word family. So unfortunately, if abuse is in the family, it becomes familiar, and we get comfortable with what's familiar. So these patterns we come here not to continue being abused our whole life, but to learn how to break those patterns. There's no God source. God does not want people to suffer, but sometimes they have to go through suffering in order to change patterns. Imagine if touching a stove didn't burn your hand. We do it until our hands melt. So there has to be a sense of pain in order to us to get us to change patterns. And the changing of patterns is what moves us closer to what God wants for us, which is love and all these beautiful elements. And eventually we do. We grow through that. I've been in toxic relationship patterns. And what helped me most was just realizing that I was okay being alone. I had to learn, like, oh, I like my life, and I'd rather be alone than in a toxic relationship. And so then I started to upgrade what I was going to be comfortable with. And so my relationship now is completely different. But it came from what I think was breaking the spiritual matrix, is that I don't like being alone. So I'd rather be with anybody
Hmm.
than to be with myself. I'll say sometimes that if you date because you're lonely, it's like food shopping when you're hungry. When you're
Oh,
hungry, you get junk. And if you're lonely, being lonely is okay, but it shouldn't be the steering influence for allowing people to come into our lives. So that's what I don't think suffering and struggle is meant by the creator to be a permanent state of consciousness. It's something for us to learn from. And unfortunately, pain and suffering and struggle help us learn, help us grow.
Thank you. And Peter, like, what is your views about a person thinks that? Okay, what I want to ask is the time exists not in a linear format, is what I believe. Okay, this is
Yeah,
past, then this is present, and this
right,
is future.
right.
It exists simultaneously.
Yes,
So
it does.
it doesn't have to go that always I go back into my past life,
I
find
know, I
heal
know.
it, and then fix it, and then come back.
Right.
No, if I'm aware of my current patterns, if I start working on my now, what is bothering and all that, don't you think all this past and future gets impacted simultaneously?
It must. I've tried to think of this a lot about because the fact that I believe that on the spiritual level there is no time. All time
Yes.
is one. And here we have past, present, and future. The best way I can think of it is that we experience time like this. So this would be current life, future life, past life. But I think on the spiritual level, it's like this. So it's all one. Like they're all happening somehow simultaneously. So there's possibilities. We might have to have a glass of wine to get to really understand it, but there's possibilities about that this life is connected to this life, and if I change in this life, it interacts with this life. So that's a possibility. Another thing I've started to entertain, and this is very bizarre, is that I might die now. Let's say when my time to die, I might reincarnate in what I would think is the past. So I might die and reincarnate in the
Wow.
1700s and have a lifetime in the 1700s and then reincarnate in 3026. That's a possibility that again
Wow.
it's not linear. Our lifetimes
You
aren't
blew
going
my
like
mind
this.
away, Peter.
Say that again.
You blew my mind away. Why not?
I know a lot of it's possible, but somehow I think that you know to make life practical, I think it's more important just to focus on the here and now. Like thinking too much about this stuff is to think about what are the practical elements. Like Edgar Cayce said something. He said, if something you're thinking about, if we're working on, if it doesn't make you a better person, then just forget about it. So this is fun, but I think that right now, thinking about, you know, I have a problem with my brother. I got to work on it. I've got this anger pattern. I got to work on it. That's the crux of focus. The rest is fun and it's
Yes,
creative. And
exactly.
I mean, I've had people experience the future, and how does that happen? And Brian Weiss has many of them. And some people have past life or life memories in other galaxies, galactic experiences. And so all of that is very interesting. What does that mean? You know, um, I think seeing the future um, sometimes gives you hope. It's like um, one client saw the world being rebuilt, that there had been a time of some calamities and tragedies, but it was hopeful that things were coming together. So it's a it's a fascinating subject.
Yes,
Each,
yes.
I hope each day I learn a little bit more about one
Yes,
of these
and we are
possibilities.
expanding. Yes, why not? And
Well, also Edgar Cayce said that we're aware right now of um, three dimensions, and he said on the Earth you can be aware of eight. So maybe we're because he said the fourth dimension is the dimension of thought. It's
okay.
just being able to think through things. That's a fourth dimension. I don't know what the fifth dimension.
We really don't know what's coming into our awareness.
Yeah,
And sleep, what happens from spiritual experience, not the scientific, the dreams and the REM. We have
yeah,
enough theory there. What happens once we fall asleep? Visiting places, astral projection, dreams,
yes, yes.
dimensions. So could you please
Again,
share?
yeah, I would rely on Edgar Cayce, and he says every one of us, we all leave our bodies when we sleep. I think on the soul level, we most look forward to sleep. We just want to get to sleep to get out of here. to to go into our soul realms. And I think when we're sleeping, we contact our guides. We get reminded of what's going on. Like Casey said, pay attention to how you feel when you go to sleep and how you wake up. If you go to bed feeling good, but you wake up troubled, something's happened in that spiritual dimension that you might want to focus on. But if you go to bed tired and you wake up really refreshed, that's usually a good sign. But I think that when we leave our bodies, see, I think dreams are oftentimes just downloads of multidimensional experiences. Like I had a very significant dream one time of just floating in the middle of the ocean. It's just big waves. I was floating in the ocean. And I remember I felt so at peace. But as I woke up, I said, that I wouldn't enjoy being in the middle of the ocean. What was going on? And I thought of it. I think that in sleep, I had a experience of the oneness, and it came through symbolically, like being one with the ocean. So I think that sometimes our dreams are just our best ways of downloading these multidimensional experiences that we have at sleep. And then I think that many of us have lots of work that we do when we sleep. Like I think that I visit people in their dreams. So many people have dreams with me. Oh, Peter, I dreamed with you last night. So I've gotten so used to hearing that. I think, oh, no wonder I wake up so tired. I'm all going all over the place at night. So I think some of us have healing ministries when we sleep. I had one woman come to a dream group, and at night she would see herself with other groups around people that were sick. She didn't know who they were, and she didn't really see who was with her, but it seemed like she had a sleep ministry of healing. Sometimes Casey talks about the planets and how they're on the 3D dimension, they're just these lifeless rocks. But on realms of consciousness, they have a lot going on. And he said sometimes we enter the realms of consciousness of Mercury, which is mental, or Saturn, which is lessons. And so those are some of the experiences that we can also have in sleep. Casey called it a sixth sense. He says you get so much during sleep. And I oftentimes think about how, during Edgar Cayce's time, people slept 9 hours a night in the 1940s. And now people sleep about 6.5 hours. And so if sleep is so important that we've cut 2.5 hours out, it's like we've gotten handicapped. And how many people remember their dreams that are so important? So I think it's quite clear that as a humanity, we're spending way too much time in the conscious realm. It's like spending too much time in the desert. We're not getting enough water. We're not getting enough nourishment, which we need to get from the spiritual realm. So I think it's quite clear why humanity is losing its way, because it's drunk on earth and it's not knowing where to find sustenance, which you're not going to find on the physical level.
Yeah. And did you see your own past lives, Peter?
Yes, I have. I have several of them, maybe 10 or 20. And they've just helped me understand elements of myself. One of the most clear dreams I had of a past life was of being Indian, being from India. Wow. And I tried to make sense of this logically, but apparently I was from a well-to-do Indian family, and I just wanted to be with my guru and meditate, and my family didn't want that. So they made me join the Air Force. I guess it was the Royal Air Force. I don't know if that was World War I or something. And I got shot down, and I was made a prisoner, and I was buried underground for 5 years. But I loved it. I said, okay, now I can do my guru work. Total isolation. So I really advanced my spiritual work by just being a prisoner of war for 5 years. And then I had a good relationship with my captors. So eventually they freed me, and I went back to India. And the whole dream happened. All I saw was very, very busy train, a train coming to a stop, thousands of people. And I could see my nanny, the woman who raised me, was looking for me. I was wanting to get back home. And in that experience, and one thing it taught me is in this life, I am the most unpicky eater. Anything you put in front of me, I'll eat it. I'll find out later what it is, but I have as a child, my mom had to be careful with it. And then it was because of this past life where I didn't have much to eat. I have a compulsion. If you ever see my plate, I will eat the last grain of rice. There will not be anything left. People always wondered, why do you do that? And then when I see people leave so much food, I'm like, don't you, oh my God,
Yeah.
don't you realize that there's prisoners starving? That
Yeah.
was one life. And then I've had lifetimes with the American Revolution, and it has to do with, I think right now we're going through the spiritual revolution. The American Revolution was a rebellion against being controlled, religious and economic oppression, and wanting to be free of that. And I think that the new age is wanting to be free of, again, of religious oppression, that there's only one way to God. And that if you're not a Muslim or a Catholic, that you're not going to get to God. And the new age is like, no, God is the God of all people. We have to come to that realization. So being part of the American Revolution was helpful for me to understand. And then lifetimes as a Native American, you know, in this life as an adult, I've only lived in Massachusetts and in Virginia, which are the first two colonies. And I've always felt comfortable in those original colonies around all the energy of the American Revolution. I think that where we choose to incarnate and where we live is very important from our past lives. That
Yes.
sometimes people, let's say they're born one place, but they don't really feel at home until they move to another place. And as a boy, my parents, we went to Greece, and I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I told them I'm from here, and they were, oh, what is he talking about? So I think I must have had a significant life in Greece. Children up till 7 or 8 easily remember their past
Yes.
lives. I think I had lives with Edgar Cayce in the past, close with Christ also. Like you're saying, I don't remember them so much because they've become less important as I've worked on the themes. I feel that right now I'm a little bit past life free. Like the past life elements are kind of integrated, and I think I'm working now more on like the guide level of just trying to, it's almost like the first half of life is a certain type of work, and then there's a second type of work, and so I'm trying to put into place kind of the work that I want to do for a public accounting. I did like a channeling session one time. The students were regressing me, and I went into this open consciousness, and I remember they were asking me, Peter, should you write a book? And the guide level was kind of saying, write a book if you want to. You don't want to write a book, that's fine. If you write a book, it'll be helpful, and if you don't, you'll probably regret it. Probably reincarnate to write the book, but it's up to you. And what I've learned is that religion, especially Christian religion, teaches you that God is very judgmental, and at the end of your life, you're judged. Were you a good person or not? It's like in Egypt, is your heart lighter than a feather? If not, you're going to hell. And what I've learned is that's not the way it is at all. That our judgment at the end of our life is purely our own. And God didn't send us to earth. We got curious. We came in here our free will. And as we've gotten stuck here, we're working on getting out of here. But it's our own, like I say, life is a self-graded course. So you plan your life, you have your guides, and then at the end of your life, you review. Here was what I tried to accomplish. How did I do? Mostly maybe this, and then it helps you with the next life to plan for it. But it's all yours. God is not judging you. God is supporting you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Peter, for
You're
sharing
welcome.
your experiences, and it was wonderful. I think we need to have one more part of it to to be able to ask you so many wide variety of questions. And
Sure.
thank you
Sure.
very much for your time, and it was wonderful.
You're very
Talk.
welcome. I enjoyed our conversation.
Enjoyed it too. Thank you very much, Peter.
You're very welcome. Take good care.